was reflecting today on a new fad that came about. I don't know, maybe it was 6, 8 years ago, and on social media. And you started seeing these cute little pictures. First day of school, kids are, standing in front of the front door, and they're holding this cute little sign, and they're all decked out in their, cute little clothes and their perfect little sneakers and stuff, and their backpacks, and they're holding this sign that says first day of school, first day of kindergarten or whatever. And I remember, seeing this flood happen. And, it was kind of cute at first, and then it was just kind of redundant, but it's something that, you put in your scrapbook, and it's a milestone, especially for, moms sending their first child off to kindergarten, or, even their baby. And it's, you see all these little tearful emojis. My baby's a kindergartner, and some moms, that's a really exciting time. Some of them, it's not an exciting time. And then, come June, you have all the senior pictures, all the graduation pictures, the kids, in their caps and gowns, and they're all excited about their new, becoming an adult, and, starting their new life. And as I was reflecting upon this the other day and thinking about the third reason why we really need to start rethinking our support of public schools is the question that parents should ask themselves: what did I get? What did my child get out of that 12 years that they just spent in the public system between the first day of kindergarten and the day of graduation? That's a really good question for us to ask ourselves. And so I decided to write a blog on it. And I explored that a little bit, and I entitled it, All the Things That Your Child Is Not Learning in the Public System. As a parent, if you were to sit down and think about, when my child turns 18, what do I think are the things that they need to, the skills and the attitudes, or the moral virtues, or whatever? What are the things that what does that finished product look like? Of course, none of us are finished products, but what does an 18-year-old finished product look like? And that I, as a parent, can say to myself, my child is ready. My child is ready for the world. Well, here are some of the things that your child will not learn in public school that, if I were to make that list, and I kind of did years ago, that I would suggest. One of the things that your child will not pick up in the public school is financial literacy. They're not going to know a thing about budgeting, investing, saving, compound interest. What else? Applying for a loan, buying a car, getting a mortgage, credit scores, the importance of a good credit score, how to build credit wisely. None of that. None of that comes out of the public system anymore. There used to be some of that. Okay. Number 2 is a practical life skill. So a practical life skill would be something that you could do in a pinch, that you could instantly go get a job doing this, or make extra money if you need it right away. Even something like being able to cut hair, being able to do almost anything with computer, welding, home repair, gardening, farming, being proficient enough in a musical instrument, or even in athletics, that you could help coach a kid for money. People are always looking for somebody to work with their kids, whether it's basketball, football, wrestling, doesn't matter, swimming. If you can hire yourself out to give music lessons or athletic lessons, you can make a little bit of money if you needed it right off the bat. How about constitutional literacy? Are our children learning Constitution? How many times, or how many schools do you think are teaching read the Constitution or the Bill of Rights? Just the Bill of Rights. How many of you think schools do you think are studying that? How many schools do you think are instilling a respect for and an appreciation for our founding fathers and all that they sacrificed to get this country going. How about our legal processes? How many children leave school understanding our system of government, our system of representative government? Not very many. Number 4 is probably the most important thing that most children do not leave school acquiring, and that is a love of learning. I mean, truly loving to learn. The schools do not teach this. Literary literacy. And what does that mean? That means that your child has read a smattering of classic books that teach moral virtue, including biographies that give good examples, great examples to us to follow. And I don't mean just reading them. I mean really studying them, writing about them, discussing them in groups. Critical thinking skills. Now, critical thinking skills is something that you'll hear a lot talked about. And critical thinking skills are not just, here, let me give you a subject and you parrot back to me what I want to hear. That's not critical thinking. Critical thinking only takes place when we have robust debate, when we have rhetoric and logic lessons. We learn what that is. When we study grammar, and then there's a lot of free discussion and freedom of speech and debate within our classes and as a field of study. Critical thinking is not happening. All you have to do is get on social media and see that that's the case. Historical literacy. By this, I don't mean that we can talk about a few names and dates in history, American or otherwise, because that's not only is that not even happening. I'm talking about mastery. I would love to see history reinstituted in we call it social studies. It's not even history anymore. It's something about how, we look at history through a social lens, a social justice lens these days. What I'm talking about is allowing a child to pick a period of history and really, really dig in and master. I don't care where in the world it is or what period of time it is, but just really understand the lessons of some historical period somewhere on the globe. And then mathematical literacy. And again, by that I don't mean, yes, my kid passed, 2 years of algebra and went into calculus or something in geometry or whatever. That's not mathematical literacy. Mathematical literacy is where you understand how something evolves. You understand what the building blocks of something are, and how you understand why a mathematician needed to solve a certain problem in society. And they built on the work of previous mathematicians. Mathematical literacy helps us to understand bigger issues and bigger theories like evolution. Why evolution is very difficult to prove mathematically. Things like the Big Bang Theory, why math matters in that. So math is really actually the basis for everything in the world. So that's a pretty big list. There may be more. If you, as a parent, were to sit down and think about what is it that I want my child to have, what do they need to be really ready as an adult? There may be more things. I would love your comments. I'd love to hear more about what you think of this list. If you expect your child to be ready for adulthood, then a lot of this needs to take place. So you're going to have to be a very involved parent. You're going to have to put aside a lot of time in order to overcome the kind of time and activity barriers and media barriers that you may have. And I think we would all agree it's going to be very difficult to find the time to help your child acquire these skills and knowledge. I wanted to share a story about something that was very heartbreaking to me. A friend of mine a couple of years back was telling me about experience that she'd had with one of her daughters that she was very close to. And this daughter had always been very obedient. She'd always been a hard worker, very, self-starting kind of a kid, took leadership classes and, was part of the leadership group in high school and so forth and so on, was a swimmer and ran track, great grades. Went off, married a great guy after a few years in college. And everybody liked this guy. And they, ended up, finishing college, getting a great job in the small town in kind of a conservative area. Well, then George Floyd was murdered, and the riots started, and the riots came to this little town. And unbeknownst to my friend, her daughter and the husband were marching in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. They took some pictures. They posted them on social media. The boss saw them, and his job was terminated. And the daughter, this friend of mine gets a call, very tearful daughter. We've lost our job, and it's just so unfair and everything. And the mom says, "Honey, what did you expect?" And hasn't spoken to her daughter since. And this is just so typical of what's happening in our modern day. This mom is the best moms you could be. But no matter what she taught her daughter, the schools overcame that and taught her daughter to be an activist, and taught her that she should have the right to do and say anything despite how it may look to an employer, and not be fired for it. And that's just not the way of the world. Our children, from the time that they enter kindergarten to the time that they graduate, receive about 14,256 hours of instruction. And for that daughter, it was 14,256 hours of various indoctrination, activist indoctrination. And it's impossible for us to overcome that kind of overwhelming influence in a child's life. This is falsely imposed guilt. It's false compassion. And what it produced in this child, this daughter that she loves, is just an inability to understand adult life. You think of all those hours that could have been used to learn all the things that I mentioned in the above list that would really have prepared that daughter for real life. And now they're just going to have an uphill battle, because they're going to continue to believe that their main purpose in life is the social justice activism. It's going to be more about that than building a life for themselves and their family. It's just such a shame. So what are our kids getting out of public school? Yeah, sure. Okay, they come out being able to read. Okay, we like to think most kids are coming out of school being able to read. Well, they can read. Some of them can read. There was just a report coming out of Baltimore that not even half of the kids had a GPA or let me say it this way. Half of the kids were coming out of the Baltimore public schools with a 0.99 GPA. And most of them were reading on an elementary school level. You cannot get along in today's society reading on an elementary school level. I mean, you can, but you're not going to get very far. You're not going to be able to be in a job that is going to get you anywhere. You're going to scrape by. Okay. Some people can do some math. Yeah. But again, the financial literacy is not there. They're not going to know and understand why They're constantly having to declare bankruptcy. They're not being able to get ahead in life. They're going to try to acquire things that they can't afford. And it's going to be a never-ending cycle if you can't understand how to manage money. And if you didn't get that from your parents, you certainly aren't going to get that from the school. If there's one thing, if the public schools did that one thing, then I would have a lot less to talk about. But there's a reason why that was eliminated decades ago. But one has to ask in all those years, why are we teaching algebra and geometry to every single student? Has anybody ever asked, why are we teaching chemistry? Why are we teaching biology? Kids come out of school, and I've mentioned this before, and it doesn't take a year or two before they can't tell you anything about what they learned in the public school. But they've learned that there's white privilege, right? They've learned that if they're white, they are guilty of white privilege, and they are oppressing people of color. And if they're a child of color, a person of color, they are learned that they're being oppressed. That's happening. They're learning that, but they are completely forgetting anything else academic that they've learned. And why is that? Because it doesn't have any meaning to them, and it's not something that they use. Okay. Anything you don't use constantly, you're going to lose. And the real danger with walking out of the public school thinking you're an oppressor or you're oppressed, and that the system is rigged, and that you're rigging it or it's being rigged against you, is that this is causing a ton of despondency. It's causing a ton of anxiety. It's causing a ton of depression. If you really believe, as you have been indoctrinated to believe for over 14,000 hours, then what is the point? What is the point in trying? I am frustrated and I am angry about this, strictly because of the waste in human capital that is happening through this indoctrination in the public schools. The story that I told you about my friend, this is in a great area. This is supposed to be a really good school. Okay, this isn't an inner city school. These are not uninvolved parents. These are parents that work hard with their kids. This is a bankrupt philosophy. It serves nobody. It is not going to bring us into an era of peace and prosperity and unity. No, this is not going to work. It's simply not, because there are too many people like me who will never accept this paradigm because it's false. I am not going to live by a false paradigm. I'm not going to be quiet. I'm not going to say, okay, well, let's just go along with this. It's a fad. Maybe it'll pass, because I don't believe it is a fad. I believe it's the latest in a series, as I mentioned in a previous video, to completely revamp American society. These philosophies of man-made climate change, their objective is to do away with capitalism, right? That's the basis for it. If we have a society, if we have industry that's polluting and people that are polluting by, driving a car, then we have to centralize that power in the government to control all that. That's the antithesis of capitalism. Man-made global warming, man-made climate change, the basic design of man-made global warming is that we destroy capitalism. The transgenderism policies, the radical LGBTQAI plus agenda is to destroy Christianity. They're going to shame and blame everybody on the planet who does not embrace transgenderism, does not embrace alternative sexuality, until we outlaw Christianity. We outlaw any religion that fights against that, right? And lastly, we have the resurgence of race tensions in the country based upon critical race theory or equity, diversity, inclusion, whatever you want to call it. And through that, we destroy our government because everything is systemically racist. All law is systemically racist. And we're going to destroy the Constitution because it was made by racist old white men. This is where we're headed. And yes, I'm angry about it. And I'm not ever going to accept these false theories. They're destructive to our way of life, and they're going to destroy the peace and prosperity and unity that we've had. I'm pleading with you to open your eyes and your ears and see what is right before you. Please think deeply, do some research, and make some changes. Turn off the television, stop listening to the news. Both sides. They're in it to make money. They're not in it to inform you. And that's the last I have to say about that.